super beautiful. And 4.5 months later, Sam and I flew to Oklahoma to see all of my family. We had a wonderful week there. We got to show him off and all be together, and it was really great. And Ernst flew in the end of the weekend to then fly back home with us, and so we just had wonderful family time together. On a Sunday morning, on October 14th, that particular morning, my mom and Ernst had let me sleep in because I had been up with him a little bit during the night, and so they let me sleep in a little bit. And when I got up, I had just gotten up, and my mom went in to check on him, and he wasn't breathing. He was gone. And we tried to resuscitate him. I tried to resuscitate him. Ernst tried. My younger brother, Jared, tried. My mom ran down to her neighbor's house, who was a nurse, and she came and tried. An ambulance was called. A helicopter to life flight him was called. But we already knew. And at the hospital, I have no idea. It felt like an eternity. I don't know how long we were there. And just waiting in silence. And when they came out and told us he was gone, our world went black. It was so dark. It was just... And I remember they let us hold him after. And holding your lifeless child's body was so hard. And I remember just holding him and just rocking with him. And all I could say over and over was, I love you, I love you, I love you. It was just unimaginable. And the days that followed after that are kind of a blur. And I was a believer. I have to say, I was a believer. My husband was not. He knew there was a God, and he would go to church with me from time to time. We weren't going to Calvary yet. But he wasn't a believer, and certainly at that point, he really wasn't a believer. And as for me, I was angry. I was so angry with the Lord. I knew there was still a God. I knew I still loved him, but I was so angry with him. I was like, how can you take a child? It's just not right. It's not natural. And so we just went through really dark days. I'll just leave it at that. And then 6 weeks later, it's crazy. 6 weeks later, I get a call. And anyway, I learned that my husband was possibly about to commit or have an affair. And I literally at that point, I felt like I was not, my face was not only buried in the mud, but I was like drowning in it at that point. And I'm like, oh my gosh, first you take my child, and now possibly my husband? It was unimaginable to me. I couldn't comprehend it. And long story short, he didn't. The minute that he heard my voice when I called him, he raced home to me, thankfully, praise God. And we realized he was in a really dark place. We were both in a really dark place. And when you're in that place and you don't have the Lord in your life, you're looking for any outlet, anything to ease the pain, to take your mind off of what's happening and your hurt and just everything that's going on. And so at that point, my husband will tell you, there was a lot of not easy conversation in our home for a while, and but we pulled through it, and we pulled through it for with a number of things in mind. It was through really good therapy and counsel, also through prayer, even though he wasn't a believer yet, and it took time. We had to get over a lot of hurdles in that regard. And my mom always says, I love this, my mom always says that the Lord fought extra hard for Ernst because he knew all the wonderful things that my husband would end up doing for his kingdom. And it is so true, because right after that, it was my husband, not me, the believer, who said, Gretchen, we need to do something, we need to go to church. And I said no. I was still just so angry. I was so mad. I was like, I don't want to go. And my husband, if y'all know my husband, he's very persuasive in a good way. And so I said, fine. I was mad. I said, fine, I'll go, but I'm not going to sing, and I'm not going to smile, and I'm not going to talk to people. And I meant it, and I didn't. I was awful that day. I was like stone cold. And so we went, and anyway, at the end of the sermon that day, Pastor Jeff asked if anyone wanted to accept Christ into their life. And I remember I was sitting there, and our heads were bowed, our eyes were closed. I was holding Ernst's hand, and I felt his other arm go up. And I remember I was like, oh my gosh. And it was, at that moment, I hadn't been able to cry for a while. I think I thought I had cried out all of my tears. And at that moment, like the floodgates just opened, and I knew, you guys, that softened my heart like nothing else. And I knew at that moment, I'm like, now we have a chance. Now we can build on a foundation, even though we're madly in love and we had a wonderful relationship and all that stuff I already told you about. Now we have a real shot. Before that, I wasn't sure, and I know he wasn't either. And from there, oh my gosh, it's just like the fire was lit, and that's when we found Calvary Monterey. And it's just amazing how God can take so much tragedy and heartache and pain and hurt and awful potential sins and all of that and make things so beautiful. And I tell you this because, of course, I would take, if I could have Sam back, I would have him back in a second. I don't stand up here and try to make this all like a romantic movie that turns out, all happy with rainbows and roses in the end. But I do have to say, like, what I love is God has given us so many glimpses, just little glimpses of His love and His mercy and His grace. And I have to tell you, on the day of Sam's funeral, he passed away on October 14th. On October 18th, which is my birthday, is when I buried my son. And I remember after the service that day, because this happened in Oklahoma, and that's where we chose to bury him, with close to my family. And I remember my mom and Ernst and I were standing in the kitchen, talking or whatever, and my purse was away from us, and all of a sudden my phone was in my purse, and this song came on, and nobody had touched it. I hadn't even been listening to the song, because it was Sam's song. It was one of the songs that we sang to him all the time. It was Godspeed by the Dixie Chicks, if anyone knows that. And it's just a beautiful little song. And I remember we all froze, because we were like, oh my gosh, that song came on. But it came on not at the beginning or anything, where you might think, oh, it's just a fluke. It came on in the middle toward the end. And the lyrics that came on were, God bless Mommy and Matchbox cars. God bless Dad and thanks for the stars. God hears amen wherever we are, and I love you. And I just remember, like, Ernst and I both, we just fell to our knees. And it's just, we've had so many little moments like that, just precious, sweet little moments that God has just given us little glimpses. And